Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going on a seriously fascinating journey that honestly might just completely reshape how you view reality itself. We're looking at some incredible research that bridges a gap you probably didn't even know existed. We're talking about the space between hard mathematics, quantum physics, and our own everyday human experience. We're going to explore the absolute boundaries of human reason. And the best part? What we find at that boundary isn't a dead end at all. It's actually a remarkable new beginning. Okay, let's dive into this with a massive, genuinely profound question. I want you to really think about this for a second. Is truth something that's just sitting out there in the universe, totally complete, waiting for us to discover it? Or is truth something we actually generate by the very way we interact with the world? This isn't just some abstract philosophical puzzle. It's practically the core of how we understand existence. Section 1. The dream of perfect reason. To really wrap our heads around our core question, we kind of have to rewind a bit. Let's look back at the early 20th century. This was an era absolutely defined by a highly confident, almost rigid belief in absolute logical certainty. Our grounding text for today dives into this beautifully. We're looking at the work of independent researcher Masashi Iwata, specifically his paper titled From Closed Reason to Open Understanding, a postural reinterpretation of Gödel's Incompleteness theorem. Iwata's research totally challenges the foundational way traditional science and logic view the observer. See, for a long time, science tried to stick the observer strictly on the outside of the system, just trying to explain the world through fixed laws without letting messy human subjectivity get in the way. And this brings us to a massive clash of ideas. Over on one side, you had David Hilbert. He was the ultimate champion of the dream of a complete system. Hilbert firmly believed that, hey, if the world is logically structured, we should absolutely be able to create a mathematical language that proves every single proposition without a single contradiction. His famous declaration was literally, we must know, we will know. But on the other side? Well, on the other side is the very disruptive reality of incompleteness, the hard reality that no system can actually prove its own consistency from the inside. Which leads perfectly into Section 2, the limit revealed by Gödel. Because Hilbert's vision of a perfect, closed dream, it was about to be quietly but completely shattered by one young mathematician. In 1931, Kurt Gödel published his famous incompleteness theorems, and what Gödel mathematically proved was that any formal system is inherently limited. You simply cannot prove a system is entirely consistent using only the rules of that system itself. It's impossible. You always need an outside perspective. He basically showed us that the light of reason just cannot completely illuminate itself from the inside. There will always be propositions that are true, but absolutely unprovable within that closed system. Now, for a lot of thinkers at the time, this felt like the total collapse of absolute truth. It was a huge deal. But Iwata's paper argues something entirely different. Gödel didn't destroy reason. Actually, scratch that. He didn't even damage it. He just drew its ultimate boundary line. This incompleteness wasn't a failure or some fatal defect. Instead, it acts as a structural mirror. It shows us that truth fundamentally relies on something beyond the closed logical system itself. But what exactly is that something? Section 3. Kamae, a new perspective. This brings us right to the core thesis of the paper. If truth isn't perfectly closed off inside a mathematical system, we have to look at the human element that Gödel's math subtly pointed toward. So the crucial point here is this Japanese concept, Kamae. In Iwata's framework, Kamae translates roughly to the unconscious orientation or stance of the observer. And listen, this isn't just a psychological attitude or a fleeting mood. It is the literal, fundamental posture we take when we encounter and attempt to understand the world. Iwata argues that this very stance is what actually forms and structures our reality. It's kind of like adjusting a microscope. The focus and the angle of the lens entirely dictate what you're going to see, right? We can't really talk about any objective truth without first acknowledging that our microscope, our subjective stance, has already been adjusted a certain way. The adjustment of this stance creates the very premise of our observation. Let's map out this dynamic process so it's super clear. Step 1. The observer takes a stance, or kamae. Step 2. From that exact stance, the internal system engages with the external world. And finally, step 3. A new truth, or integration, is generated. This means truth isn't some fixed absolute just sitting in a box somewhere. It is constantly being generated through the relationship between your stance and the world. When your stance shifts, the entire shape of truth and consistency reorganizes itself right along with it. Moving on to section 4, the breathing that generates reality. Let's pull this out of abstract philosophy and look at our daily lived experience. How does this stance generate your reality day to day? Imagine a sudden life change, let's say a big career shift. Now, the event itself is entirely neutral. The facts don't change. But based on your Kamae, your underlying stance, you might experience this new reality either as a terrifying threat or as a wildly exciting possibility. If your stance is unaligned or twisted, the world is going to reflect back confusion and anxiety. But if your stance is harmonious, the world feels natural and ordered. You are literally generating the meaning of the event through your posture toward it. And this brilliantly illustrates what we see in the notoriously weird world of modern physics. In quantum mechanics, we know for fact that the observer is required. We literally cannot completely know the true prior state of a particle before we measure it, because the very act of observation establishes a new physical reality. Just like our psychological stance creates meaning in daily life, the observer's physical stance in quantum mechanics quite literally alters the physical properties of the universe. It's mind-blowing. Therefore, truth is a dynamic alignment. It's not a fixed destination you just arrive at, it's an ongoing, fluid motion of alignment between the observer and the external world. You know that feeling when things are just falling into place? What you're really feeling there is your Kama properly integrating with your environment. Truth is simply the name we give to this continuous, healthy movement. Section 5, toward open understanding. So, how do we resolve all this? How do we actually move away from those rigid, closed systems of the past and step into what Awada calls an open understanding? Well, we have to fundamentally reframe how we view limits. Incompleteness is not a defect. It is the absolute condition for generation. That hole in the mathematical system that Gödel discovered, it isn't a failure of logic at all. It's a necessary space. It is a blank margin that literally allows the world to continually breathe, adapt, and regenerate itself. Complete perfection would mean static death. Incompleteness, that means life. And this brings us to a really critical conclusion in the paper. Awada notes that the limit of reason is not the limit of the world, not even close. The limit of reason is simply the entrance to a much broader, truly open understanding. When a closed system reaches its absolute end, it doesn't result in silence. It results in a totally new stance, a new way of engaging. Awada captures this so perfectly in his conclusion. He says, reason is not closed. Reason is breathing. Truth is a continuous inhalation and exhalation of integration with the world. We don't achieve truth by perfectly closing every single gap in our logic. We achieve truth by allowing our understanding to remain open, to remain flexible, and completely responsive to the world around us. So I want to end this explainer by turning it back to you. If your fundamental stance, your Kamae, is quite literally what draws the lines of your reality, what reality is your Kamae shaping right now? Are you approaching the world from a stance that creates conflict, or one that generates pure possibility? It's a pretty profound thought to take with you today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the limits of reason, and I genuinely hope this helps you breathe just a little more openly in your own reality.